The sovereign's crown of Zavari glimmered under the ceremonial lights of the Grand Hall, its ancient metal catching and reflecting the bioluminescent blue-green hues that danced across the crystal dome ceiling. Queen Vailina watched with practiced indifference as the latest candidate, her third cousin once removed, approached the dais with measured steps. This was the 17th succession ceremony this cycle, and she expected it to end like all the others, with the crown sitting inert, refusing to acknowledge another potential heir. The palace attendants whispered amongst themselves. Every royal from across the 12 central planets had been summoned and tested. None had made the ancient relic glow, as tradition demanded of a true successor. "The purity of our lineage remains unquestionable," said Malik, her chief advisor from his position to her right. His voice was as smooth as polished obsidian, his silver-ringed eyes never leaving the approaching candidate. Yet the sovereign's crown continues to reject all who are worthy. Queen Vailina merely nodded her long fingers, tightening almost imperceptibly on the armrests of her throne. She had ruled for nearly 5 decades now, a substantial reign by Zavari standards. The succession ceremonies were becoming more frequent, more desperate as her council grew increasingly concerned about the future of the dynasty. Perhaps, she finally said, her voice carrying the weight of countless similar conversations, "The crown seeks something our bloodlines can no longer provide." Malik's posture stiffened at the implication. "The ancient ways have preserved our dominion for millennia, Your Majesty. It would be unwise to question them now, especially with the human delegation's failure still fresh in the public consciousness." The Queen closed her eyes briefly at the mention of the humans. The peace talks had collapsed spectacularly 2 cycles ago with accusations of espionage and sabotage from both sides. The Zavari public was now more xenophobic than ever, while the human colonies along the outer rim remained vulnerable to hardliners, pushing for preemptive strikes. The ceremony continued, and as expected, the crown remained dull and lifeless on her cousin's head. The disappointment was palpable as the royal court began to disperse courtiers and officials drifting away in small clusters of conversation. "Tomorrow," Malik said, collecting the crown with gloved hands and placing it back in its ceremonial case, "we should interrogate the human prisoner again. The Earth delegation's leader must know more than he's revealed." Vailina frowned. "Ambassador Xander has been questioned thoroughly already. I doubt he possesses any information we haven't extracted. With respect, Your Majesty, traditional methods may prove more effective. The Council feels that perhaps you've been lenient with the human." The Queen rose from her throne, her elaborate headdress catching the light. "The human is a diplomatic prisoner, Malik. I will not authorize torture and risk further deterioration of relations. We need stability, not more conflict." "As you wish," Malik said, with a bow that didn't quite mask his disapproval. "Though perhaps we could arrange for him to observe tomorrow's ceremony. Some cultures find our succession rituals enlightening. It might loosen his tongue where interrogation has failed." Vailina considered this for a moment. "A calculated display of our cultural supremacy, Malik, very well. Have the prisoner brought to the Grand Hall tomorrow, but he is to be treated as a diplomatic observer, not a criminal." "Of course, Your Majesty." Malik bowed again, deeper this time, before retreating from the throne room. The Queen remained alone, gazing up at the magnificent crystal dome above. Embedded in the translucent ceiling were the constellations of the Zavari home system, glowing in patterns that had guided her people for thousands of years. Yet, lately, she had begun to wonder if those ancient stars might be leading them astray. In the depths of the palace far below the splendor of the royal quarters, Xander sat on the edge of his prison cot, staring at the strange luminescent patterns on the wall opposite him. He wasn't in a standard cell. His diplomatic status had afforded him that much courtesy, but his quarters were sparse and secure nonetheless. A prison with prettier walls was still a prison. He ran a hand through his dark hair, now grown longer than regulation length, during his months of captivity. As the leader of Earth's diplomatic mission, He had been retained while the rest of his team had been expelled from Zavari space, following the disastrous conclusion of the peace talks. Now he served as both hostage and scapegoat, a convenient symbol of human treachery for Zavari propaganda. The door to his quarters slid open without warning. Captain Krav, head of the Royal Guard, and Xander's primary handler, stood in the doorway, his tall, angular frame filling the space. "You have been summoned, human," Krav stated, his translator device giving his words a metallic edge. "The Queen wishes you to attend tomorrow's succession ceremony." Xander raised an eyebrow. "To what do I owe this unexpected cultural exchange?" "It is not my place to question Her Majesty's commands," Krav replied stiffly. "You will be provided appropriate attire and expected to observe proper protocol. Any disruption will result in immediate consequences." "Of course," Xander said, standing up slowly. "I wouldn't dream of upsetting the delicate sensibilities of the court." Krav's silver-ringed eyes narrowed slightly at the sarcasm. "The sovereign's crown is our most sacred relic. Tomorrow's ceremony is not merely tradition. It is the foundation of our civilization's continuity." "A crown that chooses its wearer," Xander mused. "Sounds more like fairy tale than foundation." "Mock our ways at your peril, human. Many believe your kind should never have been allowed past the outer colonies. The failure of your mission has only strengthened their position." Xander's expression hardened. "The mission failed because someone wanted it to fail, Captain. The evidence of sabotage we presented was dismissed without investigation." "Because it was fabricated," Krav stated flatly. "Rest well, Ambassador. Tomorrow will be educational for you." With that, he stepped back and the door slid closed once more. Xander sank back onto his cot, mind racing. In all his months as a prisoner, he had never been invited to a court function. Something had changed, but whether it represented opportunity or danger remained to be seen. The next morning, Xander was escorted by 4 royal guards to a preparation chamber where he was fitted with formal Zavari attire, a high-collared tunic in subdued blues that he noted with irony marked him as a foreign dignitary of minimal importance. The fabric was surprisingly comfortable, despite its ornate appearance adapting to his human physiology, in a way that suggested it was infused with responsive nanotechnology. Captain Krav personally led him through a series of lesser-known corridors toward the Grand Hall. "You will stand with the minor court officials," he instructed. "Speak only if directly addressed by Her Majesty, and make no sudden movements. The crown ceremony is sacred." "I understand," Xander replied, taking in the increasingly opulent surroundings as they approached the hall. The architecture blended organic and geometric forms in a way that Earth designers had never quite mastered, creating spaces that felt simultaneously ancient and futuristic. They entered the Grand Hall through a side entrance, and Xander had to suppress a gasp. The main chamber was vast, dominated by a soaring crystal dome that filtered the planet's reddish sunlight into prismatic beams. Hundreds of Zavari courtiers and officials stood in concentric circles around a central dais, where the throne resided. Queen Velina was already seated, her elaborate royal garments, making her seem more sculpture than being. Krav positioned Xander among a group of minor officials, who regarded the human with barely concealed distaste. From this vantage point, he could see the ceremonial case that presumably contained the famous crown, held by robed attendants near the queen. "Another day, another rejection," murmured an official standing near Xander. "This is the 18th candidate this cycle." "The royal bloodline has grown too diluted," replied another in a hushed tone. "Perhaps we should look to the outer families again." Their conversation ceased as trumpets sounded, announcing the arrival of the day's succession candidate. A tall, regal Zavari female entered her bearing, proud as she proceeded toward the throne. Xander recognized her as Provincial Governor Satari, whose reputation for harsh efficiency had reached even his diplomatic briefings before the failed peace talks. Queen Velina rose as the governor approached and gave a formal greeting in the ancient Zavari tongue that Xander's embedded translator struggled to interpret. The ceremony proceeded with ritualistic precision statements of lineage oaths of fealty And finally, the presentation of the crown. When the ornate case was opened, Xander could finally see the fabled sovereign's crown. It was unlike any crown he had imagined, not a circle, but a complex, almost organic structure of intertwined silver-white metal and crystalline elements. It seemed to capture light from the hall and concentrate it within its structure. Governor Satari knelt before the queen, and the crown was placed upon her head by Velina herself. The hall fell completely silent, hundreds of Zavari holding their breath collectively. Nothing happened. The crown remained inert, its crystals dull. After a precisely timed interval, Queen Velina removed the crown, her expression revealing nothing as she returned it to its case. Governor Satari rose, bowed deeply, and retreated from the dais, her composure intact despite the public rejection. Malik stepped forward from his position beside the throne. "The crown has spoken," he announced to the assembly. "We shall continue our search for a worthy successor." As the formal part of the ceremony concluded, the assembled courtiers began to converse in low tones. Xander remained in his assigned position, observing the political currents swirling through the room. He could sense factions forming and reforming alliances being tested in the wake of another failed succession. His attention was drawn back to the dais as Malik approached the queen and spoke to her in hushed tones. Though too distant to hear, Xander could see Velina's expression change subtly, a tightening around her eyes, a slight straightening of her already perfect posture. Then, to his surprise, she looked directly at him. "Ambassador Xander." The queen's voice carried effortlessly across the hall, causing conversation to cease immediately. "Approach." Krav materialized at his side, hissing, "Walk slowly, eyes lowered, stop 3 paces from the first step." Heart pounding, Xander followed these instructions, aware that every eye in the hall was now fixed upon him. He stopped at the prescribed distance, inclining his head in what he hoped was an appropriate show of respect. "Your Majesty," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I am curious," Queen Velina said, her tone conversational, yet carrying to every corner of the silent hall, "what an Earth diplomat makes of our succession ceremony." Xander chose his words carefully. "It appears to be a profound tradition, Your Majesty. The selection of leadership is sacred in many cultures." "Indeed," she replied. "Though on Earth I understand crowns do not choose their wearers." "No, Your Majesty. Our leaders are generally chosen by the people, not by ancient artifacts." A murmur ran through the assembly at what some clearly perceived as impertinence, but the queen merely smiled a small, enigmatic expression. "And perhaps that explains the chaotic history of human governance," she observed. "Councillor Malik has suggested an experiment, one that might prove educational for all present." She gestured to an attendant who approached with the crown's case. "Would you satisfy our curiosity, Ambassador, and try the sovereign's crown?" The request stunned Xander. From the reactions around the hall, it clearly shocked the court as well. Captain Krav stiffened beside him, and urgent whispers erupted throughout the assembly. "Your Majesty," Malik interjected smoothly, stepping forward. "While the suggestion was mine, I meant it merely as a philosophical point of discussion. To actually place our most sacred relic on a human's head would be a demonstration," Velina cut him off, "of the crown's discernment. If, as we all believe, only one of pure Zavari royal blood could ever activate the crown, then there is no risk. And if our human guest has no objection—" She looked at Xander expectantly. He realized he was being used in some court power play between the queen and her advisor, but he couldn't determine the stakes or sides. Still, it was the most interesting thing to happen in months of captivity. "I would be honored, Your Majesty," he replied with a slight bow. Malik's face darkened, but he stepped back as Queen Velina herself rose and descended the few steps of the dais, crown in hand. The silence in the hall was absolute as she stood before Xander. "Kneel, Ambassador," she instructed quietly. Xander lowered himself to one knee, heart hammering against his ribs. He had studied the sovereign's crown in diplomatic briefings, a technological marvel from Zavari's ancient past, said to contain impossible sensors that could somehow detect the unique genetic signature of the royal bloodline. No one outside the Zavari species had ever worn it, as far as Earth's records indicated. He felt the peculiar weight of the crown as it settled onto his head. It was lighter than it appeared, and seemed to adjust itself slightly, conforming to his human skull structure. For a moment, nothing happened, and he heard the beginning of satisfied murmurs from the court. Then the world exploded in light. The crown ignited with brilliant white radiance, brighter than it had ever shone in recorded history. Gasps and cries of alarm echoed throughout the grand hall as the light pulsed and expanded, washing over Xander in waves of warmth that resonated deep within his bones. Through the blinding glow, he could just make out Queen Velina's face. Her expression, one of absolute astonishment, silver-ringed eyes, wide with shock. Beyond her, Malik had staggered backward, his composure shattered. "Impossible!" Someone shouted, the voice lost in the growing tumult. The light receded as suddenly as it had appeared, drawing back into the crown, until it settled into a steady, unmistakable glow. Xander remained frozen in his kneeling position, afraid to move, aware that something monumental and irreversible had just occurred. Queen Velina recovered first, her royal training asserting itself. "The sovereign's crown has spoken," she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. "For the first time in 3 centuries, it has recognized a successor." "Sacrilege!" Malik's voice rang out. "This is some human trickery. The crown cannot possibly recognize an alien as worthy." "Yet we have all witnessed it," the queen replied calmly, though Xander could see the calculation behind her composed exterior. She turned to address the court. "The succession ceremony is concluded. The council will convene immediately to discuss this unprecedented development." Guards rushed forward as she removed the still glowing crown from Xander's head, returning it to its case, where the light continued to pulse gently. Captain Krav seized Xander's arm, pulling him to his feet. "What did you do?" he hissed, too quietly for others to hear. "Nothing," Xander replied truthfully, his mind reeling. "I swear." Queen Velina was already ascending back to her throne, issuing rapid commands to her inner circle. Malik stood apart, his face a mask of barely contained fury, as he conferred with several officials Xander recognized as belonging to the traditionalist faction. "Return the prisoner to his quarters," Malik ordered Krav. "Triple the guard and permit no visitors. This matter requires thorough investigation." Krav nodded and began escorting Xander from the grand hall. As they passed through the enormous doors, Xander caught a final glimpse of the chaotic scene behind them, centuries of certainty and tradition upended in a single, blinding moment. "Your accommodations are being upgraded," Captain Krav informed Xander as they moved swiftly through the palace corridors, flanked by 6 additional guards. "The Queen has ordered you transferred to the diplomatic wing." "Prison is prison, no matter how gilded the cage," Xander replied, still trying to process what had happened in the grand hall. "This is not merely a change of scenery. Human," Krav said, his tone uncharacteristically subdued. "What occurred today has not happened in living memory. The crown has never reacted to any non-Zavari. Never." They arrived at an ornate door that slid open to reveal a spacious suite. Unlike his previous cell, these quarters featured large windows, overlooking a section of the palace gardens, luxurious furnishings, and what appeared to be a private bathing chamber. "You will remain here until the Queen summons you," Krav stated, as the guards took positions outside. "Do not attempt to leave. These quarters, comfortable as they may be, are still heavily monitored and secured." After the guards departed, Xander explored his new prison. The rooms were undeniably beautiful, decorated in the flowing aesthetic of high Zavari culture. With technology so seamlessly integrated, it was almost invisible. The windows, despite offering a stunning view, were clearly impenetrable barriers. He was examining a shelf of what appeared to be actual physical books, a rarity even on Earth, when the door slid open again. He turned, expecting Krav, or perhaps another guard, and was stunned to find Queen Vaylina herself, entering accompanied by a single female attendant. Xander quickly bowed, uncertain of the proper protocol for a prisoner who had just been mystically selected by an alien crown. "Leave us," the Queen commanded her attendant, who hesitated before complying with obvious reluctance. Once they were alone, Vaylina studied Xander with an intensity that made him deeply uncomfortable. Her height, nearly a foot taller than his 6 feet, combined with the elaborate royal attire and her natural Zavari grace, created an imposing presence. "What are you?" she finally asked, her melodic voice stripped of its public formality. "I'm exactly what I appear to be, Your Majesty. A human diplomat who has been imprisoned for crimes he didn't commit." She circled him slowly. "The sovereign's crown has existed since the founding of our dynasty. In 3,000 years it has never, not once, activated for anyone without the purest royal Zavari bloodline. Yet for you, it blazed brighter than it has in centuries." She stopped directly before him. "So I ask again, what are you?" "I can't explain what happened," he admitted. "I know nothing about your crown beyond what was in our diplomatic briefings." "Then perhaps we're asking the wrong questions," she said, moving to the window. "Tell me about your lineage, Ambassador Xander, your ancestors." He shrugged. "Nothing remarkable. My parents were colony administrators on Europa. Their parents were scientists. Before that, my family lived in the Eastern Continental Union on Earth. Standard genetic profiles, routine enhancements, nothing unusual." "And have you undergone genetic testing beyond the standard colonial requirements?" "No, why would I?" The Queen's expression revealed nothing, but she seemed to come to a decision. "You will be examined by our geneticists, immediately." "I don't consent to becoming a laboratory specimen," Xander stated firmly. For the first time, a flash of something like amusement crossed her features. "You misunderstand your position, Ambassador. The Crown's recognition has transformed you from prisoner to something else entirely. Something without precedent. The Council is in chaos, with half demanding your immediate execution, and the other half insisting on thorough investigation. And which half do you stand with, Your Majesty?" She turned back to him, the light from the window casting her features in sharp relief. "I stand with Zavari. Always. If there is even the slightest possibility that the Crown's reaction was genuine." "Then what?" he pressed when she didn't continue. "Then, everything we believe about ourselves, about humans, about the very foundation of our empire, must be reconsidered." She moved toward the door. "Rest, Ambassador. Tomorrow will bring either enlightenment or execution, depending on what our tests reveal." After she left, Xander sank onto a cushioned bench, mind racing. He had come to Zavari to negotiate peace, to prevent the brewing conflict between humans and the alien empire from erupting into open warfare. Instead, he had somehow stumbled into the center of a succession crisis that could either bridge the gap between their species or ignite the very conflict he had sought to prevent. Outside his windows, the artificial twilight of the palace gardens began to glow with bioluminescent flowers and floating light orbs. In their gentle radiance, he tried to find some calm amid the storm his life had suddenly become. The genetic examination took place in Xander's quarters the following morning. A team of Zavari scientists, led by a stern-faced specialist named Dr. Evan, arrived with equipment that folded out into a comprehensive scanning array. "This will be non-invasive," Dr. Evan explained, his tone making it clear this courtesy was by royal decree rather than personal inclination. "But thorough. Please remain still during the procedure." Xander sat motionless as beams of light passed over and through him, collecting data at a cellular level. The process took nearly an hour, during which none of the scientists spoke, except to give technical instructions to one another in their native language, which his translator struggled to interpret. When they finally finished, Dr. Evans studied the results on a holographic display, visible only to him, his expression gradually shifting from clinical detachment to poorly concealed shock. "Is something wrong?" Xander asked. The scientist ignored him rapidly, inputting commands that sent the data to a secure server. "We will report our findings to Her Majesty," he stated curtly, before gathering his team and equipment and departing without further explanation. Hours passed with no word. Xander was provided meals by silent servants, but received no visitors, not even Captain Krav. By the time the palace lights dimmed to simulate evening, his patience had worn thin. The door finally opened to admit not the Queen, as he had expected, but Counselor Thalia, a middle-aged Zavari female, whom he recognized from the peace negotiations. Unlike most of the court, she had been cautiously supportive of improved relations with humans. "Ambassador," she greeted him with a formal bow. "I hope you have been treated well." "As well as any prisoner might expect," he replied guardedly. "Have you come to explain what's happening?" Thalia gestured to the sitting area. "May we speak candidly?" Once they were seated, she activated a small device that emitted a soft hum. "Privacy field," she explained. "What I'm about to tell you is known only to the Queen, Dr. Evan, and myself." "I'm listening." "The genetic examination revealed something extraordinary. Your DNA contains markers that are unmistakably Zavari, in origin specifically markers associated with the royal bloodline." Xander stared at her. "That's impossible." "So we all believed, yet the evidence is irrefutable. Further analysis suggests these markers were artificially integrated into your genetic structure, not through natural reproduction, but with a precision that far exceeds current human genetic engineering capabilities. You're suggesting I was, genetically modified before birth? By whom and why?" Thalia's expression grew grave. "That is the question that has thrown our council into turmoil. There are ancient records largely dismissed as myths of experimental outposts established during the first expansion era over 4 centuries ago. These outposts allegedly conducted cross-species genetic research, including attempts to create human Zavari hybrids. For what purpose? The records are fragmentary. Some suggest scientific curiosity, others a more pragmatic attempt to create beings who could survive in environments hostile to pure Zavari. All such research was officially abandoned and condemned when the conservative Reformation swept our society 3 centuries ago. Xander's mind raced. "So you're saying I might be descended from some ancient genetic experiment? That's why the Crown reacted to me." "It appears to be the only explanation that fits the evidence. The Crown responds specifically to certain genetic sequences present in the royal bloodline. Sequences you inexplicably carry." "Does the Queen believe this?" he asked, still struggling to process the implications. "Her Majesty is pragmatic. She recognizes the potential value in your unique status, particularly given the current political climate." Thalia leaned forward. "The conservative faction led by Malik is pushing for your immediate execution and a cover-up of the entire incident. They claim you've desecrated the crown through human trickery." "And what do you believe, Counselor?" She studied him for a long moment. "I believe that nothing happens without purpose. For centuries our species have circled each other with suspicion and hostility. Perhaps your existence, this unexpected connection between our bloodlines, offers a path forward that neither side could have envisioned." "What happens now?" "The Queen has made a bold decision. Tomorrow she will announce to the court that the Crown has chosen you as her consort." "Her what?" Xander almost choked on the word. "It is a political necessity," Thalia explained calmly. "The Crown's recognition cannot be denied. Too many witnessed it. By declaring you consort rather than successor, the Queen maintains her authority while incorporating you into the power structure in a way that the traditionalists cannot easily challenge." "Does my opinion matter in this arrangement?" he asked dryly. "Would you prefer execution?" Thalia countered. "Because those are the only options Malik's faction will accept. Either you are legitimized through royal association, or you are eliminated as a threat to the entire system." Xander stood and paced to the window, gazing out at the bioluminescent garden, now glowing in the artificial night. "So I go from prisoner to prince consort in the span of 2 days. All because of genetic markers I never knew I carried. The universe seldom cares about our plans, Ambassador." but it occasionally offers unexpected opportunities to those prepared to seize them. And if I agree to this arrangement, what then? Then you gain the protection of royal status and the chance to influence the future of human-Zavari relations from a position of unprecedented access. It was manipulation plain and simple, yet Xander couldn't deny the logic. His diplomatic mission had failed, but this strange twist of fate offered a second chance not just for him, but potentially for both species. "I'll need to speak with the Queen," he said finally. Thalia nodded, deactivating her privacy field. She anticipated as much. "Her Majesty will visit you at first light. I suggest you use the intervening hours to consider carefully what you wish to say." She rose to leave, then paused. "One more thing, Ambassador. Not everyone at court will accept this arrangement regardless of the Crown's blessing. Watch your step carefully." After she departed, Xander remained by the window, watching the hypnotic pulsing of the alien plants in the garden below. Somewhere in his family tree, it seemed lurked a secret that connected him to this world in ways he could never have imagined. Whether that connection would prove salvation or doom remained to be seen. Queen Velina arrived precisely at first light as promised. She entered Xander's quarters unannounced, wearing simpler attire than her ceremonial regalia, though still unmistakably royal in bearing. "Counselor Thalia has informed you of our proposal," she asked without preamble. "She has," Xander replied, having spent most of the night considering his response. "May I ask why you're supporting this plan? You could easily have me eliminated and claim the crown was tampered with." The Queen's expression remained impassive. "Several reasons. First, too many witnessed the crown's reaction, a reaction unlike any in recorded history. Second, the genetic evidence cannot be dismissed. And third," she hesitated briefly, "the Empire faces challenges that many at court refuse to acknowledge. Our expansion has stalled. Resources grow scarce in the central systems, and human colonies continue to push into territories we consider rightfully ours." "You see me as a diplomatic tool," Xander concluded. "I see possibility," she corrected him. "The Crown has never been wrong in 3,000 years of selecting rulers. If it recognized something valuable in you, I would be foolish to ignore its wisdom merely because you were born human." "And what exactly does being your consort entail?" A flicker of amusement crossed her features. "Not what human historical records might suggest. It is primarily a political position. You would attend court functions, participate in certain ceremonies, and be accorded the respect due a royal spouse. But there would be no physical expectations. Just the expectation that I help you maintain control of your court and improve relations with humanity." "Precisely." She moved closer, studying him with those unsettling silver-ringed eyes. "Consider your options realistically, Ambassador. As my consort, you would have influence protection and the opportunity to pursue the very peace you were sent here to negotiate. The alternative is less pleasant." "A diplomatic way of threatening execution," he observed. "Politics is rarely subtle in matters of survival." She extended her hand, palm up, a formal Zavari gesture of alliance. "Do we have an agreement?" Xander looked at her offered hand, aware that this decision would irreversibly alter the course of his life. But hadn't that already happened the moment the crown had blazed to life upon his head? He placed his palm against hers, noting the strange texture of Zavari skin against his own. "We have an agreement, Your Majesty." "Velina," she corrected. "If we are to convince the court we are united, such formality would seem strange." "Velina." He repeated the alien name, feeling unusual on his tongue. She withdrew her hand. "The announcement will be made at mid-cycle. Captain Krav will escort you to the throne room and instruct you in the proper protocols. Until then, I suggest you prepare yourself. Today we'll test both our abilities to persuade." After she left, Xander was provided with elaborate attire, befitting his new status clothing, that blended traditional Zavari styling with subtle accommodations for human physiology. As he was dressed by silent attendants, he couldn't help but marvel at the bizarre turn his mission had taken. He had come to Zavari as Earth's representative, seeking to prevent war. Now, he was to become royal consort to the alien queen, bound to her by ancient genetics he hadn't known he possessed. Captain Krav arrived to escort him to the throne room, his demeanor noticeably different, less superior, more cautiously respectful. "The Queen has informed me of your elevation," Krav said as they walked. "I admit I find it difficult to comprehend." "That makes two of us, Captain. Nevertheless, the Sovereign's crown has spoken, and in 3 millennia of our history, it has never been wrong." Krav's tone suggested he was trying to convince himself as much as Xander. "I will continue to serve as your security chief, though in a changed capacity." They arrived at an antechamber adjacent to the throne room, where Xander could hear the murmur of hundreds of voices from the assembled court beyond. "The ceremony will proceed as follows," Krav instructed. "When the Queen announces you, you will enter from this door. Proceed directly to the dais, ascend the steps, and kneel before Her Majesty. She will present you with the insignia of consort, accept it with both hands. Then rise and stand at her right hand. Do not speak unless directly asked a question by the Queen." "And what exactly is the court being told about me? About why the crown reacted as it did?" "Only that you carry ancient Zavari lineage discovered through genetic testing. The full details remain known only to the innermost council." Krav checked a communication device at his wrist. "It is time." The massive doors swung open, and Xander heard Queen Velina's voice magnified throughout the vast chamber. "And so the crown's wisdom reveals to us a connection long forgotten, a bridge between our worlds that existed before our current divisions. I present to you Xander of Earth, bearer of the ancient bloodline, recognized by the Sovereign's crown as royal consort." Taking a deep breath, Xander stepped through the doorway and into the throne room. The assembled court fell silent, hundreds of Zavari nobles and officials watching his approach with expressions ranging from curiosity to poorly disguised hostility. Queen Velina sat upon her throne resplendent in full ceremonial regalia. Beside her stood Malik, his face a mask of political composure that did little to hide the fury in his eyes. Xander proceeded exactly as instructed, approaching the dais, ascending the steps, and kneeling before the Queen. She rose, holding a medallion of intricate design, the insignia of consort, he presumed. With this symbol, she announced, her voice carrying throughout the hall, "I acknowledge the crown's wisdom and welcome Xander as royal consort, advisor to the throne, and representative of the forgotten connection between our peoples." As she placed the medallion in his outstretched hands, she spoke more quietly, for his ears alone. "Remember, we must appear united. The court watches for any sign of weakness." Xander accepted the medallion, which felt strangely warm in his hands, and rose to stand beside her as directed. The court remained silent for a long moment before a single noble stepped forward, an elderly Zavari, whom Xander recognized as High Chancellor Doran, nominal head of the council. "Your Majesty," Doran began, his voice quavering slightly with age. "While none would question the crown's judgment, many wonder at the unprecedented nature of this selection. Might the council be permitted to examine the genetic evidence that supports this remarkable development?" Before the Queen could respond, Malik stepped forward. "Indeed, Your Majesty. Such transparency would do much to allay the concerns of those who fear external influences at work." Xander tensed at the thinly veiled accusation, but Queen Velina remained perfectly composed. "The genetic analysis has been verified by our most trusted scientists," she replied smoothly. "Dr. Evan himself has confirmed the presence of royal markers in consort Xander's DNA markers that can be traced to the first expansion era. All the more reason for the council to review these findings thoroughly," Malik pressed. "If indeed there was interbreeding between our species in our ancient past, this raises profound questions about our history, our sovereignty, and our future." The word interbreeding sent a murmur through the court, exactly the reaction Malik had intended. Xander realized. The advisor was skillfully playing to xenophobic fears. The detailed findings will be made available to the Council. Queen Velina conceded, though I remind all present that the Sovereign's Crown's judgment supersedes all other considerations. It has recognized Consort Xander, and that recognition cannot be challenged without questioning the very foundation of our dynastic authority. It was a clever counter, Xander had to admit. By framing any opposition to his position as an attack on the monarchy itself, Velina had temporarily neutralized Malik's maneuver. The ceremony continued, with various nobles and officials coming forward to offer formal acknowledgement of his new status, though many did so with visible reluctance. Throughout it all, Xander maintained the dignified silence Krav had advised, speaking only brief words of acceptance when directly addressed by the Queen. As the formal proceedings concluded and the court began to disperse for the traditional celebratory feast, Councillor Thalia approached the dais. Your Majesty, might I suggest the consort take some refreshment before the banquet? The ceremony has been lengthy, and human physiology has different requirements than our own. It was clearly a pretext, but Queen Velina nodded graciously. A thoughtful suggestion, Counselor. Please escort Consort Xander to the preparation chamber. We shall reconvene shortly. Once they were alone in a small chamber off the main hall, Thalia activated her privacy field once more. You performed well, she said, without preamble. But Malik is already mobilizing his faction against you. The genetic evidence will not satisfy him. He'll claim falsification or manipulation. I gathered as much from his comments, Xander replied. What's his ultimate goal? Malik has long believed that Zavari must remain pure and separate from other species, particularly humans. Your elevation represents everything he opposes. He'll seek to discredit you, and by extension the Queen's judgment. And how far will he go to achieve that? Thalia's expression grew grave. There have been disturbing movements among certain military factions loyal to him. Security rotations altered, communications restricted. Captain Krav has reported unusual patterns that may indicate preparation for some form of action. You're suggesting a coup attempt. It cannot be ruled out. Malik has been positioning himself as heir apparent for decades. The Crown's rejection of all candidates frustrated his ambitions, but your recognition has threatened them entirely. Xander considered this information carefully. Does the Queen know? She suspects, but proof remains elusive. Malik is too clever to leave obvious traces. Thalia checked the time. We must return soon. Just be vigilant, consort. Your life now extends beyond diplomacy. You've become a symbol in a struggle for Zavari's future. The days that followed were a blur of court functions, political maneuvering, and private tutoring in Zavari customs. Xander was assigned luxurious quarters in the royal wing, technically adjoining the Queen's chambers, though separated by several rooms close enough to maintain the appearance of a united front, while preserving both their privacy. He saw little of Queen Velina outside official functions, where they performed their roles with practiced precision. In public, they presented the image of respectful partnership with Xander, deferring to her authority, while she occasionally sought his counsel, reinforcing his legitimacy to the watching court. Behind closed doors, however, their interactions remained formal and focused entirely on political strategy. Velina proved to be a complex figure, brilliant, ruthless when necessary, yet genuinely concerned for her empire's future beyond her own reign. A week after his elevation, Xander was summoned to a private audience with the Queen in her personal study, a room he had not previously been permitted to enter. He found her reviewing holographic star charts, showing the border regions between Zavari space and human-controlled systems. The traditionalist faction is growing bolder, she said, without looking up as he entered. 3 provincial governors have formally protested your appointment, citing contamination of royal custom. Are you surprised? Xander asked, studying the star chart with professional interest. He recognized several contested systems where human colonists had established outposts in territories the Zavari claimed. Not surprised, but concerned by their coordination. Malik's influence extends further than I had anticipated. She deactivated the hologram and turned to face him. Tell me, consort, what would Earth's response be to a formal acknowledgement of human settlement rights in the Altair sector in exchange for withdrawal from the Proxima systems? The question caught him off guard. It was the first time she had directly addressed the territorial disputes that had been central to his original diplomatic mission. Earth's colonial administration would likely accept such terms, he replied carefully. Altair offers more sustainable habitation, while our presence in Proxima was primarily strategic rather than practical. As I suspected, she activated a different holographic display, this one showing a complex genetic diagram that Xander assumed represented his own unusual DNA. Dr. Evan has continued his research into your genetic markers. He believes they originate specifically from the Royal Expedition to Outpost Vega, approximately 400 cycles ago. What was this outpost? Xander asked, attempting to interpret the complex display. Officially, a scientific research station. Unofficially, according to records Dr. Evan has uncovered, it was a genetic engineering facility, established by my ancestor, Queen Talia III, who possessed unusual interest in other species. Velina's expression revealed a hint of personal interest beneath her political exterior. The outpost was abandoned during the Conservative Reformation, and all records of its experiments were supposedly destroyed. Yet, some of their subjects or their descendants apparently made their way to human space, Xander concluded. So it would seem, she deactivated the genetic display. This connection could provide historical precedent for closer relations between our species. A shared heritage, however limited, might sway moderate factions currently allied with Malik. Xander was beginning to understand the Queen's strategy. She was using his unexpected status to outmaneuver the traditionalists, building a case for human-Zavari cooperation based on historical connections rather than merely practical necessity. You're repositioning the narrative, he observed, from humans as alien intruders to long-lost genetic cousins. A slight smile curved her lips. Politics requires adaptation, consort. When the Crown chose you, it provided an opportunity I would be foolish to waste. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent chime. The Queen activated a communication panel, and Captain Crab's voice emerged. Your Majesty security protocols Alpha 3 have been initiated. Please remain in your chambers with the consort. Additional guards are en route. Velina's expression hardened instantly. Explain, Captain. There has been an incident in the Central Security Hub. Communications are compromised. I cannot say more on this channel. The Queen deactivated the panel and moved swiftly to a wall panel which opened to reveal a hidden arsenal of weapons. She selected a slender device that Xander recognized as a Zavari energy pistol. Can you use this? She asked, offering him a similar weapon. Basic training was part of diplomatic preparation. He confirmed, accepting the pistol and checking its charge. Good. Alpha 3 protocol indicates internal security breach, likely the coup attempt Thalia warned of. She activated another hidden panel, revealing a private communication system. This connects directly to loyal units. If Malik has moved against us, we need to... The lights in the chamber suddenly dimmed, switching to emergency illumination. The communication panel emitted a harsh static before going silent. Power systems compromised, Velina stated flatly. We must assume the worst. She moved to yet another panel, this one revealing a concealed passage. This leads to the secure vault beneath the throne room. The sovereign's crown is kept there when not in ceremonial use. If Malik has staged a coup, securing the crown is essential. Xander followed her into the narrow passage which sealed behind them. You anticipated this possibility. I've ruled for 50 years, consort. One doesn't survive that long without preparing for betrayal. Her tone was grim as they descended a spiral stairway, illuminated only by dim emergency lighting. They emerged into a larger tunnel that appeared to run beneath the main palace complex. Velina led the way with confident familiarity, moving swiftly despite the limited visibility. The vault has independent power and security systems, she explained, as they hurried along. Even if Malik has compromised the main palace grid, the crown should remain protected. A distant sound of energy weapons echoed through the tunnel, suggesting conflict somewhere above them. Velina quickened her pace, and Xander matched her, aware that their lives likely depended on reaching the vault before Malik's forces. They rounded a corner and found themselves facing a heavily armored door. The Queen pressed her palm against a recognition panel, which glowed briefly before the massive door began to slide open. Inside was a circular chamber, dominated by a pedestal in its center, upon which rested the ceremonial case containing the sovereign's crown. Standing beside it, expression grim, was Counselor Thalia. "Your Majesty," she greeted them with visible relief. "I feared you had been captured." "Report, Counselor," Velina commanded, moving immediately to check the crown's case. Malik's forces moved precisely at third quarter shift change. They've taken control of the main security grid, communications, and power systems. Captain Krav and loyal guards are engaging them in the eastern wing, but they're outnumbered. "And the council?" "Most members have been detained in the assembly chamber. Those loyal to Malik were obviously forewarned and are supporting his actions. He's claiming you've been mentally compromised by human influence and are unfit to rule." The Queen's expression didn't change, but Xander could see her shoulders tighten with anger. "A predictable justification for treason." "What's your plan?" Xander asked. "We can't stay hidden in this vault indefinitely." Velina turned to him, her silver-ringed eyes gleaming in the vault's lighting. "No, we cannot. The crown must be seen for power to be legitimate. Tradition demands it." She opened the case and lifted the ancient artifact. "Which is why we must take it to the Grand Hall and confront Malik directly." "That's suicide," Thalia protested. "His forces control all main corridors." "Not all," the Queen countered. "The ceremonial passages remain accessible through the vault system passages known only to the reigning monarch and heir." She looked at Xander. "Passages the crown will open only for those it recognizes." Understanding dawned. "You want me to use my connection to the crown to access these passages?" "Precisely. Together we can reach the Grand Hall undetected. Once there, with the crown in our possession, we can invoke ancient rites of challenge that even Malik's traditionalist supporters cannot ignore." It was a desperate plan, but Xander could see no better alternative. Already the sounds of conflict seemed to be growing closer. Malik's forces were likely searching for them throughout the palace complex. "What do I need to do?" he asked. Velina held out the crown. "Hold it. Let it recognize you again. Then follow its guidance. The passages will reveal themselves to those the crown accepts." Xander took the ancient artifact, feeling its unusual weight and the strange warmth it seemed to generate. As before, it began to glow at his touch, though less dramatically than during the succession ceremony. "Remarkable," Thalia murmured, watching the crown's reaction. The light from the crown pulsed briefly, then seemed to flow, like liquid, forming a directional beam that pointed toward a section of the vault wall that appeared solid and unremarkable. "Follow its light," Velina instructed. "The way will open." Xander approached the indicated wall, the crown's light intensifying as he drew nearer. When he was within arm's reach, a previously invisible seam appeared in the seemingly solid surface, widening to reveal another passage beyond. "Quickly," the Queen urged. "Thalia, make your way to Captain Krav if possible. Inform him of our plan and direct loyal forces to the Grand Hall." The counselor nodded. "Be careful, Your Majesty. Malik will not surrender power easily, even when confronted with ancient law." They parted ways, with Thalia returning through the main vault door, while Xander and Velina entered the hidden passage revealed by the crown. This tunnel was different from the others, its walls inscribed with ancient Zavari script that glowed faintly as they passed, responding to the crown's proximity. "These passages date from the founding of the dynasty," Velina explained, as they hurried along. "They were created as a final defense for the monarch in times of crisis." "And they respond only to the crown and those it recognizes." "Yes. It's why securing the crown is always the first priority in any conflict. Without it, legitimate authority cannot be maintained. They followed the winding passage upward, guided by the crown's light, eventually reaching what appeared to be a dead end. Once again, the crown's glow intensified, revealing another hidden entrance that opened at Xander's approach. They emerged behind the throne itself, concealed from the main hall by ornate screens. Through gaps in the decorative panels, Xander could see that the grand hall was filled with armed guards and court officials, with Malik standing on the dais, addressing the assembled group. "And so it is with great reluctance that I assume temporary authority until a proper succession can be established," he was saying, his voice carrying the weight of rehearsed conviction. "The Queen's judgment has been compromised by human influence, exemplified by her irrational elevation of a prisoner to royal status." Murmurs of both agreement and concern rippled through the gathered crowd. Xander noticed that many council members appeared to be present under guard, rather than by choice. Velina took the crown from his hands, her expression resolute. "When I step forward, remain behind the screen until I signal you. The impact of your appearance with the crown's blessing must be timed precisely." He nodded understanding, and watched as she straightened to her full height, assuming the regal bearing that had commanded respect for 5 decades. With graceful deliberation, she placed the crown upon her own head, where it began to glow with steady blue light, the traditional response to the legitimate monarch. She stepped through the screen and onto the dais, her sudden appearance causing gasps and exclamations throughout the hall. Malik whirled to face her, momentarily shocked, before recovering his composure. "The Queen," he announced, managing to sound both surprised and concerned, "who has regrettably become unfit to rule." "I bear the sovereign's crown, Counselor Malik," Velina proclaimed, her voice effortlessly filling the vast chamber. "By what authority do you declare me unfit?" Malik gestured to several senior council members standing near him, clearly his co-conspirators. "By the authority of the High Council, who have witnessed your increasing instability, culminating in the desecration of our most sacred traditions, through your association with a human prisoner." "The crown itself recognized Consort Xander," she countered. "Would you claim greater wisdom than the artifact that has guided our dynasty for 3 millennia? "The crown was manipulated," Malik declared. "Our scientists have discovered evidence of interference, perhaps technologies the humans have developed specifically to undermine our sacred institutions." It was a clever lie Xander realized impossible to disprove in the moment, and calculated to play on existing fears of human technological advancement. "A serious accusation," Queen Velina replied, her tone dangerously calm. "One that questions not just my judgment, but the crown's very integrity. I invoke the right of succession challenge." The declaration sent visible shockwaves through the assembly. Even Malik seemed taken aback, though he quickly recovered. "The right cannot be invoked without a legitimate challenger," he stated. "And since no Zavari of royal blood has been recognized by the crown, there is no basis for such a challenge." "But there is one the crown has recognized," Velina replied, turning slightly toward the screen. Consort Xander stepped forward. Taking a deep breath, Xander emerged from behind the screen and moved to stand beside the Queen. The reaction was immediate. Guards raised weapons. Courtiers gasped or cried out, and Malik's face darkened with fury. "This is absurd," he snarled. "A human cannot participate in our sacred rites." "The crown has already judged otherwise," Velina stated firmly. She removed it from her head and held it out to Xander. "Let it demonstrate its will again before all witnesses." With hundreds of eyes upon him, Xander accepted the crown. As before, it burst into brilliant white light, at his touch far brighter than the blue glow it had exhibited for the Queen, and impossible to dismiss as trickery, given the number of witnesses. Murmurs of awe rippled through the crowd, and Xander noticed several of Malik's guards lowering their weapons in confusion, clearly unsettled by the crown's unmistakable reaction. "This proves nothing," Malik insisted, though his voice had lost some of its conviction. "Some human technology." Enough. The command came from High Chancellor Doran, who stepped forward from among the detained council members. I have served 6 monarchs over my lifetime, Counselor Malik. Never in all those years has the crown reacted as it does to this human. Whatever he may be, the sovereign's crown recognizes him. That cannot be denied. Ancient law is clear. Queen Vailina pressed her advantage. When the crown recognizes 2 potential claimants, the right of succession challenge must be observed. The crown itself will make final judgment. Malik glanced around, clearly gauging his support among the assembled court and guards. Xander could see the calculation in his eyes, whether to press forward with force or yield to the traditions he claimed to defend. Before he could decide, the main doors of the Grand Hall burst open, and Captain Krav entered with a contingent of royal guards, weapons ready. Behind them came Counselor Thalia and, surprisingly, Dr. Evan. Your Majesty, Krav announced, the palace is secured. Loyal forces have regained control of all critical systems. Malik's remaining support visibly crumbled at this news. Several of his allied council members stepped away from him, attempting to distance themselves from the failing coup. Counselor Malik, the Queen, said, her voice hard as steel, you are charged with high treason against the crown. Guards detain him and his primary conspirators for judgment. As Krav's forces moved to take Malik into custody, the advisor made a desperate lunge toward Xander, drawing a concealed weapon. The dynasty will not be polluted by human blood, he shouted. Xander reacted instinctively, raising the crown as if to shield himself. The artifact flared with blinding intensity, emitting a pulse of energy that knocked Malik backward. He collapsed to the floor, his weapon clattering away. In the stunned silence that followed, Queen Vailina reclaimed the crown from Xander's hands and addressed the assembly. For 50 years I have ruled in accordance with our traditions. But traditions must evolve, or they become chains rather than foundations. She placed the crown upon her head, where it glowed with steady blue light once more. The sovereign's crown has shown us a path forward, one that acknowledges ancient connections between our species that we have long denied. She gestured for Dr. Evan to step forward. The scientist approached the dais, carrying a data tablet. Tell them what you have discovered, Doctor, she commanded. My genetic analysis confirms that Consort Xander carries markers consistent with the royal bloodline. Dr. Evan stated, his voice echoing through the silent hall. Further research has revealed these markers originated from Outpost Vega, where Queen Talia III authorized genetic exchange experiments 4 centuries ago. Before the Conservative Reformation, such outposts were a relatively common part of our ancestors' efforts to understand and adapt to the wider galaxy. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as this information was absorbed, the revelation of a history many had never suspected. We stand at a crossroads, Queen Vailina continued. We can cling to rigid interpretations of purity that deny our own complex history, or we can embrace the wisdom of the crown, which has recognized a connection between our peoples that transcends our current divisions. She held out her hand to Xander, who stepped forward to take it. Standing together before the court human and Zavari, they presented a powerful symbolic image. The conflict between our species benefits neither. The contested border systems drain resources we could better use, ensuring prosperity for all our peoples. And now, we discover that ancient bonds exist between us, bonds the crown itself has recognized. High Chancellor Doran stepped forward, his aged face solemn. What do you propose, Your Majesty? A new accord. Recognition of existing human settlements in exchange for technological cooperation and secure trade routes. And acknowledgement of our shared heritage, limited though it may be, as a foundation for lasting peace. The Chancellor considered this for a long moment before bowing deeply. The Crown's wisdom has guided us for 3 millennia. If it recognizes this human as worthy of royal status, who are we to question its judgment? One by one, other council members followed suit, bowing in acknowledgement, if not yet full support. Malik's conspirators, now under guard, watched in defeat as their cause collapsed around them. In the days that followed, The palace returned to a semblance of normalcy, though with subtle but significant changes. Malik and his primary collaborators faced justice for their treason, while minor supporters were granted leniency in exchange for loyalty oaths to the crown. Xander's status as royal consort was formalized in a ceremony that combined traditional Zavari elements with symbolic nods to his human heritage. Though some traditionalists still grumbled about contamination of royal customs, the crown's undeniable recognition of him made outright opposition difficult to maintain. More importantly, negotiations between Zavari and Earth reopened with Xander serving as a unique bridge between the species. His diplomatic experience combined with his new royal status gave him unprecedented influence in shaping a framework for peaceful coexistence. One evening, 3 months after the failed coup, Xander found Queen Velina in the palace's biological garden, a vast enclosed ecosystem filled with rare plants from across Zavari territories. She stood beneath the artificial moonlight, observing a particularly unusual specimen that emitted a soft, pulsing bioluminescence. "The midnight bloom," she explained as he approached. "It exists nowhere else in the galaxy. Our scientists have never been able to transplant it successfully beyond this garden. Perhaps it needs something unique to this environment." Xander suggested studying the beautiful plant with its ethereal blue glow. "Perhaps." She turned to face him, her expression more open than he had ever seen it in public. "Like some species, it thrives only in specific conditions we don't fully understand, but must respect nonetheless." He recognized the metaphor for what it was. And sometimes those conditions change, unexpectedly. "Indeed." She gestured to a nearby bench, inviting him to sit beside her. "The Council has approved the preliminary framework for the settlement exchange. Earth's representatives appear cautiously supportive as well." "They're still adjusting to my new status," Xander admitted. "The colonial administration was prepared for many outcomes of my mission, but royal consort to the Zavari queen wasn't among them." A hint of amusement curved her lips. "Diplomacy often takes unexpected paths. This one has proven more personal than most." Over the months of working closely together, their formal political partnership had gradually evolved into something more complex, not romance in the human sense, but a deep, mutual respect and growing understanding that transcended their different biologies and cultures. "Have you considered visiting Earth?" he asked. A formal state visit could cement the new accords in a powerful symbolic way. "I have never left Zavari space," she admitted. "But perhaps it is time for such a journey. The Crown's choice has pushed us both beyond traditional boundaries." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the midnight bloom pulse with gentle light. Around them, the garden's ecosystem continued its carefully balanced dance of life, different species coexisting in harmony, despite their alien nature to one another. "Dr. Evan believes there may be other descendants of the Vega outpost experiments," Velina said eventually. "Other connections between our peoples unknown and unsuspected." "A shared heritage hidden in plain sight," Xander mused. "Perhaps that's the Crown's true wisdom, recognizing that we're already connected, whether we acknowledge it or not." "A poetic interpretation," she observed, but not without merit. She rose from the bench, her tall form silhouetted against the garden's bioluminescent backdrop. "Tomorrow we finalize the Altair Proxima exchange agreement, the first concrete step toward a sustainable peace." With many more to follow, he added, standing to join her. As they walked together through the garden, Zavari queen and human consort, the path ahead remained uncertain in its details, but clear in its direction. The Crown's unexpected choice had opened possibilities. Neither species had imagined a future where ancient connections might form the foundation for new bonds between worlds that had stood on the brink of war. Behind them, the midnight bloom continued its eternal pulse, its light neither fully Zavari nor foreign, but something unique and beautiful in its own right, much like the unprecedented alliance their unexpected union represented.